last but not least, the bill of lading. I hate paperwork. Wish I could stick to labeling. This is so confusing. Why can't somebody else do this? One box of hazmat, 1 liter. Signed, Andy the Hazmaster. Should be good to go.
Let's see what you have going on here, Andy.
Well, I just finished up the bill of lading. I have the addresses on top, 1 box of hazmat and the quantity, signature on the bottom, so I'm ready to ship, right?
Not exactly, Andy. You're missing some information on the shipping paper. Just as we had requirements for package marking, where we included the UN number, proper shipping name, class hazard and packing group, we're going to have some of the same requirements for the shipping paper. For example, you just described this material as hazmat, and you're missing UN number, proper shipping name, class hazard and packing group. So you have a long way to go.
So that information just wasn't for the package then?
Correct. Now let's go to the classroom and learn more about shipping paper requirements. Marks and labels for hazardous material shipments communicate the hazard with the package. Shipping papers communicate the hazard away from the package. Shipping paper requirements can be found in Subpart C of the Hazardous Materials Regulations, in Part 172-200. Shipping papers will probably provide the most information about the shipment when the shipment's in transport, and emergency responders, enforcement agents, and others will be looking for this information while the shipment is in transport. Now, since many offerers complete a shipping paper electronically, it's still important to walk shippers or offerers through this process to ensure that they understand what's required from the electronic output. In class, it's a good idea to have a shipper or an offerer, or your student for that matter, to fill out a shipping paper manually, just to get into the habit of understanding the process for filling out a shipping paper. As I mentioned before, shipping paper requirements can be found in Subpart C of the Hazardous Materials Regulations. 172-200 outlines the applicability for shipping papers. So let's take a look and see what it says. Description of hazardous materials required. Except as provided otherwise in this subpart, each person who offers a hazardous material for transportation shall describe the hazardous material on the shipping paper in the manner required by this subpart. Now the regulations go on to describe some exceptions to this requirement. So again, if you're training in the classroom, ensure that you understand these exceptions to the rules so you can communicate that to your students. The goal of the shipping paper is to quickly identify the hazardous materials described. So let's take a look at some of the preparation requirements. 172-201 in the Hazardous Materials Regulations outlines the preparation and retention of shipping papers. Paragraph A states that when a description of hazardous material is required to be included on a shipping paper, that description must conform to the following requirements. When a hazardous material and a material not subject to the requirements of this subchapter are described on the same shipping paper. What that means is that if I'm describing a hazardous material on the shipping paper with something such as the stool or some type of furniture, the hazardous material has to be listed first on the shipping paper, or in a way that clearly distinguishes it between that of the furniture or that of something not required or subjected to the hazardous materials regulations. So here's how we would distinguish between a hazardous material and a material not subjected to the regulations. The regulations state that you could enter the hazardous materials first in the shipping paper in a color that clearly contrasts from that of the non-hazardous material, or by entering a X in the HM column on the shipping paper, or as an alternative, entering the letters RQ when the material meets the definition of a hazardous substance. Additional information for the shipping paper are that the information must be legible and printed manually or mechanically, and must be printed in English. The pages must be consecutively numbered if there are more than one page, and must contain emergency response information when required by the regulations. An important point you'll want to make in class are the retention and record-keeping requirements. Here's what the regulations state. Each person who provides a shipping paper must retain a copy of the shipping paper required by this subpart or an electronic image thereof that is accessible at or through its principal place of business, and must make the shipping paper available upon request to an authorized official of the federal, state, or local government agency at reasonable times and locations, meaning that these retention of shipping papers have to be available to those coming in to do an inspection or to conduct an investigation. Now, the retention requirements are as follows. For hazardous waste, the retention times are 3 years, and for all other hazardous materials, the retention times are 2 years. Unlike other modes of transportation, there really is no given format for what a shipping paper should look like for U.S. domestic transportation. The shipping paper can be in the format of a hazardous waste manifest, a bill of lading, a multimodal dangerous goods form, or on any form that's supplied by the carrier. What's important on the shipping paper is the information that's contained on it. The information must be accurate and complete according to the regulatory requirements. The following 4 basic descriptions must be entered on the shipping paper in strict sequence as follows, and this can be found in 172.202 of the Hazardous Materials Regulations. The identification number for the hazardous materials shown in column 4 must be entered first, preceded by the applicable UN, NA, or ID number. Next, the proper shipping name of the hazardous material shown in column 2 must be entered. The hazard class or division number for the material shown in column 3 must be entered next. And lastly, the packing group in Roman numerals as shown in column 5 must be entered on the shipping paper. There are some alternatives that can be entered here on the basic description. An offeror may enter the words class or division before the applicable class hazard number, and also may enter the letters PG before the applicable packing group entry. Also required as part of the basic description is the total entry of the hazardous materials covered by the basic description and the number and types of packages. Just as we saw with marking, there may be some additional information that needs to be described on the shipping paper to accurately reflect the shipping description. For example, if an offeror is describing a material that's covered by a special permit, the special permit number may need to be entered on the shipping paper. These requirements can be found in 172.203 of the Hazardous Materials Regulations. Section 172.203 spans across approximately 15 paragraphs and outlines additional description requirements. These requirements include special permits, limited quantities, marine pollutants, hazardous substances, so it's important to understand your audience and their shipping needs. Regardless of the format, the shipping paper must contain a certification statement that certifies that the shipper or the offeror has done everything that they should be doing to bring that shipment fully in compliance before it's offered for transport. And the certification statement can be described in the following 2 ways. This is to certify that the above named materials are properly classified, described, packaged, marked, and labeled, and are in proper condition for transportation according to the applicable regulations of the Department of Transportation. The alternative shipper certification would be as follows. I hereby declare that the contents of this consignment are fully and accurately described above by the proper shipping name and are classified, packaged, marked, and labeled, placarded, and are in all respects in proper condition for transport according to the applicable international and national governmental regulations. The regulations also state that the certification statement must be signed. In paragraph D of 172.204, the regulations state that the certifications required by paragraphs A or C of this section must be legibly signed by a principal, officer, partner, or employee of the shipper or his agent and may be legibly signed mechanically or manually by typewriter or by other mechanical means. The regulations only cover the minimal requirements for shipping papers. As an instructor, you'll want to familiarize yourself with letters of interpretations so that you can describe in detail any other additional requirements that the students may be facing in your class. Students coming into your class may be facing some of the same things that Andy was facing when he was trying to complete his shipping paper, meaning that overburdened with a lot of different paperwork, responsibilities, and that can just confuse the process even more for completing a shipping paper. So be sensitive to their job functions and patiently walk them through the process of filling out a shipping paper. And since we're talking about Andy, let's go see how he's doing. Let's see what you have here, Andy. You have your number of packages, your package type, UN number, proper shipping name, class, hazard, and packing group. I'd say you're off to a good start, Andy.
And now that it's typed up, they don't have to try to read my handwriting.
That's correct. Now let me ask you this. If you had a non-hazardous material and you wanted to describe it on this shipping paper, you think you could do it?
Well, I probably have to make another bill of lading, right?
Not necessarily. The regulations state that if you have a hazardous material and a non-hazardous material described on the same shipping paper, you just need to list the hazardous material first, describe it in a color that clearly contrasts to that of the non-hazmat, or place an X in the HM column just like you have it here.
So as long as it's clearly distinguished, I could do both.
Sure, absolutely. The first shipping paper Andy produced would have been rejected by just about any carrier, but without proper training, he never would have known.